The story I'm about to tell you isn't something I found in a book. It didn't come from a movie. This happened. The names are changed, but the fear is real. This is about the Evans family, and it starts, as so many bad things do, with a gift. David Evans was a history professor, a man who loved facts and logic. His wife, Lena, was a photographer, drawn to beauty in forgotten places. Their daughter, Chloe, was 12. She was quiet, creative, and carried a small camera everywhere, trying to see the world through her mother's lens. They lived in a comfortable old house on the edge of Stillwater, Pennsylvania, where the woods pressed close and the town's history went deep. David's passion was local genealogy. For months, he'd been piecing together the history of the old Blackwood Cemetery, a neglected hilltop graveyard from the early 1800s. One Saturday, after a long day of documenting weathered headstones, he found something. Not in the records, in the dirt. Near a collapsed section of the oldest wall, half buried by leaves and mud, was a small carved box. It wasn't fancy. It was made of a dark, almost petrified wood, and on its lid was a symbol. A circle, but inside it wasn't a cross. It was a twisted, leafless tree, its roots and branches mirroring each other in a perfect, unsettling symmetry. The latch was a simple iron hook, rusted shut. He brought it home, a curious artifact. "Look at this," he said at dinner, placing the dirt-caked box on the table. "Probably just some kid's trinket box from a century ago, left behind." Lena ran a finger over the carved tree. "It's cold," she murmured, "even in this warm room." Chloe's eyes lit up. "Can I have it? To keep my special rocks in?" David, pleased to see her interest in something historical, agreed. "Of course, sweetie. Let's clean it up first." He worked the rusted latch with oil until, with a gritty shriek, it opened. The inside was lined with faded, crumbling velvet, and it was empty. But the moment the lid lifted, Lena swore the kitchen light flickered, and Chloe, who was standing closest, took a small, sharp breath. "You okay, honey?" Lena asked. She just nodded, staring into the empty box. "It smells old," she said. "Not like dirt or mold, but like cold stone and dry, dead flowers." They cleaned it. Chloe placed her favorite quartz crystals inside and put the box on her dresser. That night, the first change happened. Lena woke at 3:07 a.m. to the sound of whispering. It was coming from Chloe's room. She crept down the hall, her heart a soft drum in her chest. Pushing the door open, she saw Chloe sitting upright in bed, bathed in moonlight. She was staring at the carved box on her dresser. Her lips were moving, forming silent, deliberate words. "Chloe," Lena whispered. The girl's head turned slowly. Her eyes were open, but they seemed glazed, distant. "He's thanking me," Chloe said, her voice a monotone, "for letting him out." A chill, sharper than any winter draft, sliced through Lena. "Who is, baby? There's no one here." Chloe blinked, and the clarity returned to her eyes. She looked confused, tired. "I had a weird dream, Mom, about a man in the ground. He was thirsty." Lena tucked her back in, dismissing it as a night terror. She took the box from the dresser and placed it on the high bookshelf in the living room. Problem solved. But the next day, the animals left. They had a dog, a golden retriever named Bear, who was afraid of nothing, and an old cat, Miso, who lived for sunny patches on the carpet. When David came down for coffee, the back door was standing wide open. Bear was gone. Not just gone, vanished. No barking, no tracks in the dew-heavy grass. Miso was huddled under the couch, a low, continuous growl rumbling from her throat, her fur puffed out, her eyes wide black saucers. They searched the neighborhood all day, put up flyers, called the shelter. Bear was family. His absence was a physical ache in the house. That night, the scratching started. It came from inside the walls, a slow, deliberate drag like a single fingernail tracing the path of the old house's bones. It started in Chloe's room, then seemed to move to the ceiling above their bed. David, the rational man, blamed it on tree branches or squirrels, but there were no trees touching that side of the house, and the sound was too intelligent. It would stop the moment one of them sat up to listen, only to start again minutes later, a little closer. Chloe changed. The creative, smiling girl became withdrawn. She spent hours just sitting, looking at the box on the shelf. She stopped using her camera. When Lena asked why, Chloe said, "He doesn't like the flashes. They show him for what he is." "Who, Chloe? Who is he?" She wouldn't answer. She just started drawing instead. Page after page of the same symbol, the twisted tree from the box. She drew it on notebooks, on her arms with marker, once in the condensation on the bathroom mirror. When David tried to wash it off, the lines seemed to have etched themselves faintly into the glass. The cold spots began. You'd walk from the kitchen to the hall and pass through a pocket of air so cold it made your teeth ache. It always lingered near wherever Chloe was. The houseplants began to wilt, then die, their leaves turning black and brittle as if scorched by frost. A week after Bear vanished, they found Miso. Not alive. She was in the basement, a place she never went. She wasn't injured. She was just empty. Lying perfectly straight, her eyes open and milky. It was as if the life had simply been siphoned out of her. The vet was baffled. He said, "It's like she just gave up." The final straw for David was the photograph. Lena, trying to reconnect with her daughter, suggested they develop the last roll of film from Chloe's camera. In the darkroom, under the red safe light, the images swam into existence. Pictures of the woods, of the house, a self-portrait of Chloe smiling. And the last one. It was a shot of Chloe's bedroom, taken from her own bed. In the corner of the room, near the closet, the shadows didn't behave like shadows. They coalesced. They formed a tall, thin shape, a suggestion of a man with a bowed head, and from that form, darker tendrils reached out, one stretching towards the bed, another pointing directly, unmistakably, at the lens, at the person taking the picture. But Chloe was in the bed. She was in the picture. She couldn't have taken it. Lena's hands shook as she held the dripping print. The logical world was crumbling. That night, as the scratching in the walls gave way to a soft, wet sound, like mud being squeezed, David made a decision. He wasn't a deeply religious man, but he knew evil when it sat at his dinner table, when it scared away his dog, killed his cat, and clung to his daughter. The next morning, he went to the one place he'd avoided, St. Michael's Parish. He asked to speak to a priest, not for guidance, but for a soldier. He was introduced to Father John Matheson. He wasn't an old, bookish man. He was in his 50s, with a carpenter's build and eyes that had seen this kind of terror before. David showed him the box, told him everything. The cemetery, the whispering, the animals, the cold, the photograph. Father Matheson didn't smile. He didn't dismiss it. He held the box and flinched as if it were painfully cold. He traced the twisted tree. "This isn't a Christian symbol," Father Matheson said, his voice grave. "This is something older, something that hates the cross. You didn't just find a box, Professor. You found a lock, and your daughter opened it." He looked David straight in the eye. "This entity," he said, "it's not haunting your house. It's haunting her. It's attached to Chloe. It's drinking the warmth, the life, the joy from her. The pets, they felt it. They were practice. It's growing stronger." David felt the world tilt. What do we do? Father Matheson placed the box on his desk. "We fight. But you must understand this is not a game. It will not go quietly. It has tasted your home, your family. It wants more. Bringing this into my church today has drawn a line. It will know, and it will push back." He leaned forward. "Go home. Do not leave Chloe alone, not for a second. I need to research this symbol. I need to know what we're dealing with before I step into your home, because when I do,
The real battle begins, and it will use everything it has to keep its hold on your little girl." David drove home, Father Matheson's words echoing in his skull. He pulled into his driveway, his blood running cold. Every window on the first floor of his house was dark, except for Chloe's. Her bedroom light was on, and standing in the window, silhouetted against the yellow glow, was not his daughter's small frame. It was the tall, impossibly thin shadow from the photograph. It was waiting for him.
David Evans sat frozen in his car, the engine ticking as it cooled. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his eyes locked on the silhouette in his daughter's window. It was tall, its head cocked at an unnatural angle, as if its neck were broken. It didn't move. It just stood, a void cut from the light behind it. Logic screamed at him, a trick of the light, a coat on a chair. But the primal part of his brain, the part that knew the shape of predators, recognized it. It was the same form from the photograph. It was real. He threw the car door open and ran for the house, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't bother with his keys. The front door was unlocked, swinging inward with a soft creak. The house was silent, but it was a thick, listening silence. The air was stale and cold, like the inside of a tomb. "Lena? Chloe?" No answer. The living room was dark. The carved box was no longer on the bookshelf. A fresh drawing lay on the coffee table, the twisted tree, drawn over and over in frantic, heavy strokes, the paper nearly torn through. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Chloe's door was closed. A sliver of yellow light bled from underneath. From behind the wood came a sound, a low, rhythmic shushing, like someone gently rocking in an old chair. "Chloe? Baby, it's Dad." He pushed the door open. The room was warm and bright. Chloe was in bed, the covers pulled up to her chin, reading a book. The box sat innocently on her nightstand. There was no shadow, no broken-necked silhouette, just his little girl. "Hey, Daddy," she said, smiling. It was her normal smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were flat, like painted glass. "Where's Mom?" David asked, his voice tight. "She's making tea, I think. I had a bad dream." David walked to the window. The view was of the backyard, the woods a dark wall in the distance. Nothing. He looked down. On the hardwood floor, directly below where the silhouette had stood, was a small, dark patch. He knelt and touched it. It was damp, and it smelled of wet earth and rotten leaves. "Chloe," he said, turning back to her. "The box, I need to take it." Her smile vanished. "No." The word was flat, final. "It's mine. He gave it to me. He needs it to stay." "Who needs it, honey? Who gave it to you?" She didn't answer. She just stared at him, and for a second her pupils seemed to swallow the blue of her irises, expanding into bottomless black pools. Then she blinked, and it was gone. "I'm tired, Daddy." Lena was indeed in the kitchen, staring blankly at a kettle that hadn't yet boiled. She jumped when David touched her shoulder. "Did you see anything in Chloe's window?" he asked. She shook her head, her face pale. "No, but I heard something, in the basement, like something heavy being dragged. I called for Chloe, and she answered from right behind me, but she'd been upstairs the whole time." She wrapped her arms around her. "David, I'm hearing her voice when she's not there." That night, the rules of the haunting changed. It was no longer content with scratches and cold. David lay awake, listening. The shushing sound from Chloe's room had started again, a relentless, metronomic noise. Then it stopped. A new sound took its place, a voice. It was Chloe's voice, but wrong. It was layered, a chorus of whispers speaking in unison, coming from the air vent in the corner of their bedroom. "Daddy, it's so dark in the ground. so cold. Let me in your bed. Let me get warm." Lena stifled a sob. David sat up, his blood like ice. "I'm not your daughter," the voice whispered, a hint of a guttural laugh beneath the words. "She is a vessel, so warm, so sweet. We're becoming intertwined." Then from the hallway, the sound of small, bare feet padding, step, drag, as if one foot wouldn't lift properly. It stopped outside their door. The doorknob began to turn, slowly, silently. "Chloe?" David called out, his voice cracking. The turning stopped. A single sharp thump hit the door, as if a forehead had been pressed against it. Then the footsteps moved away, back down the hall. But they didn't go towards Chloe's room. They went past it, towards the closed door of the basement. They heard the basement door open, then the slow, dragging steps descending the wooden stairs into the dark. David was out of bed in an instant, throwing the door open. The hallway was empty. The basement door stood ajar, a rectangle of pure blackness. A smell wafted up, the smell from the wet patch on Chloe's floor. Earth, decay. "Chloe," he said, as his voice echoed into the void. "Chloe, are you down there?" From the depths, Chloe's voice called back, sweet and clear. "Yes, Daddy. Come see what I found." He took one step down. The wood groaned. The air grew frigid. He took another. "David, don't!" It was Lena behind him, clutching his arm. Her face was a mask of pure terror. "That's not her." From the blackness below, the sweet voice shifted, warping into the layered, hateful whisper from the vent. "Too late." The basement door slammed shut behind them with a force that shook the house. The lock clicked. They were trapped in the hallway, and from Chloe's room, the real Chloe began to scream, a high, piercing sound of utter terror. They threw themselves against the door, pounding. "Chloe!" Her screams were suddenly muffled, as if a hand were clamped over her mouth. Then they stopped altogether. The silence that followed was worse. The locked doorknob began to rattle violently, then stilled. A moment later, a small, pained voice came from the other side. "Mom, Dad, it hurts. He's making me say things. He's in my head. He says he's from the tree that grows in the dark." Then the voice was ripped away, replaced by the entity's rasp. "She is my soil. I will root in her soul. You will watch her wither." The next morning, the door was unlocked. Chloe was in her bed, asleep, but her sleep was fitful. Dark circles bruised her eyes. Her skin was pale and clammy. On her forearm were 4 faint bruise-like marks, resembling long, thin fingers. Father Matheson called at dawn. His research had been urgent, and his findings were dire. The symbol is a sigil of solitary growth from a heretical pre-Christian cult that operated in those woods. They believed in a dark gardener, a spirit that could be bound to a physical object, like that box, and planted in a living person. It feeds on innocence, on life force, twisting the host into something else. It's not a ghost, it's a parasitic spirit. The grave you found it by, who was it? David, trembling, checked his notes. An unnamed plot, just a fieldstone marker with that same tree symbol etched on it. A practitioner, Father Matheson concluded. He bound himself to that box, hoping for some form of afterlife. He's been dormant, starving in the dark for 2 centuries. Your daughter didn't just open his box, she offered him a feast. He will not let her go. I'm coming over now. We must perform a blessing of the house, a prayer of protection over Chloe. It will not expel him, but it may weaken his hold, cage him within her room. It will be a battle of wills. And David, he will retaliate. He will use everything he knows about you, about your family, to break you. Father Matheson arrived within the hour, carrying a simple black bag.
He was dressed not in vestments, but in plain clothes. He had a vial of holy water, a worn Bible, and a small silver crucifix. The moment he stepped across the threshold, the house reacted. Every light bulb in the foyer blew out with a series of soft pops. The temperature plummeted. From upstairs, a guttural, furious growl echoed down the stairwell, something no human, and certainly not Chloe, could make. Chloe, who had been listless on the couch, suddenly sat upright. Her head swiveled towards the priest, her lips pulled back from her teeth in a snarl. "You have no place here, shepherd of the dead God," the layered voice spat from her throat. "This ground is mine. This flesh is mine." Father Matheson didn't flinch. He met the thing's gaze. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to be silent." He sprinkled holy water towards her. Chloe, or the thing inside her, shrieked. It wasn't a sound of pain, but of pure, incandescent rage. She scrambled backwards over the couch, her body moving with a spider-like agility. "You burn with your faith, but she burns brighter. I will cook her from the inside out." The priest moved quickly, blessing the doors, the windows, anointing the frames with oil. He recited psalms in a steady, commanding voice. With each word, the oppressive
The sight of Bear's bones, arranged like a grisly centerpiece on their kitchen floor, shattered the last pretense of normalcy. David stood paralyzed, the glass of water slipping from his hand to shatter on the tiles. The sound seemed to wake the house. Upstairs, Lena screamed. David took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He found her in their bedroom, backed against the headboard, staring at the far wall. The wallpaper, a bland floral pattern they'd always meant to replace, was bleeding. Long, vertical streaks of a dark, viscous fluid seeped from the ceiling to the floor, forming a rough, humanoid silhouette. The air reeked of ozone and wet soil. "It touched me," Lena whispered, her voice raw. "I was asleep, and I felt a hand, so cold. It was wrapping around my ankle." David pulled her close. Her skin was ice. On her ankle, 5 faint, bruise-like marks were already forming. From Chloe's room next door, a new sound, a low, rhythmic thumping. Not the shushing of a rocker. This was the sound of a body hitting a wall, over and over. They rushed in. Chloe was on her bed, but she was rigid, her back arched like a bow. Her small fists were clenched, and with every exhale her body would convulse, slamming her spine against the headboard. Thump, thump, thump. Her eyes were wide open, rolled back so only the whites showed. The silver crucifix around her neck glowed with a faint, sickly heat, the skin beneath it an angry, weeping crimson. "He's angry," she choked out between spasms, her voice a strained mix of her own and the entity's guttural rasp. "The little cross, it burns, but I can burn her more." Father Matheson arrived within minutes, summoned by David's frantic call. He took one look at Chloe, at the bleeding wall, and his face hardened. "It's escalating. The blessing is a barrier, but it's like holding back a flood with a broom. It's finding cracks. The pain it's inflicting on Chloe to protest the cross, it's a strategy. It wants us to remove it." "We can't let her suffer like this," Lena cried, reaching for the glowing crucifix. The priest gently but firmly caught her wrist. "If we take it off, he has full control. What he did to your pets will be a parlor trick compared to what he'll do through her. The pain is terrible, but it is her armor." He turned to David. "We need to know our enemy. We need its name. The grave you found, I need to see it, now." Leaving Lena with a vial of holy water and stern instructions to recite the Lord's Prayer aloud if anything moved, David and Father Matheson drove to the desolate Blackwood Cemetery under a leaden sky. The air was still and heavy. The fieldstone marker was as David had left it, half sunk in the earth, but the ground around it was different. The grass in a 3-foot radius was dead, blackened and brittle, and in the bare, dark soil, fresh symbols had been scraped into the dirt, not the twisted tree, but chaotic, angry slashes. Father Matheson knelt, ignoring the foul smell. He brushed his fingers over the stone's crude carving. They didn't believe in naming their dead. They believed names had power, could call a soul back or trap it. He began to carefully dig around the base of the stone with his hands. The soil was loose, as if recently disturbed. His fingers struck something, not a bone, but another piece of wood. He pulled it free. It was a flat, rotten plank, likely from the original coffin, and on it, carved with desperate, jagged strokes, was a single word: Malachar. Not a name given at birth, a title or a curse. It translates roughly from fragments of their texts to the root in the deep dark. Not a soul, but a presence they cultivated, a spiritual parasite. As he spoke the word Malachar aloud, the wind picked up, howling through the pines with a sudden furious intensity. The dead grass around the grave swirled. From the woods, a branch snapped, loud as a gunshot. "It knows we're here," David said, his skin crawling. "It knows we're learning," Father Matheson corrected, standing. "We have a focus now. We can address it directly. But this changes the game. It is far older, far more entrenched than a single grave. This is just its anchor. Chloe is its vessel." Back at the house, the situation had deteriorated. Lena met them at the door, her face ashen. She said, "The water," pointing a shaking finger. Every tap in the house was running at full blast, sink faucets, shower heads, the bathtub. But the water wasn't clear. It was a rust brown, thick with silt and flecks of rotten leaves. The smell of stagnant pond water filled the air. And Chloe was no longer in her room. They found her in the basement. She was sitting cross-legged in the center of the concrete floor, in total darkness. The only light came from the open door at the top of the stairs, illuminating her in a faint cone. She was perfectly still. The thumping had stopped. In her lap was the carved box. "Chloe?" David called, his voice echoing. Her head lifted slowly. Her eyes were fully black, like oil spills. When she spoke, it was purely the layered, hateful voice of Malachar. "You went to my rest. You spoke my name. You invite me in deeper." "In the name of Jesus Christ, leave this child," Father Matheson commanded, starting down the stairs. Chloe's head tilted. A cruel smile played on her lips. "Your Christ had a crown of thorns, a tree twisted for him. I am the thorn. I am the twist. She is my crown." She stood up, her movements jerky, puppet-like. "You want a show, priest, a demonstration of my claim?" She pointed a finger at the far wall of the basement where David's old workbench stood. The heavy vise attached to the bench began to unscrew itself, the metal groaning in protest. It floated into the air, then slammed against the wall with terrifying force. Again and again, dents appeared in the concrete. "Stop it! You're hurting her!" Lena screamed from the top of the stairs. Her muscles tear, her bones strain, but she does not feel it. "I drink the pain. It is sweet." The entity spoke through Chloe, even as her small arm trembled with the effort of the telekinetic assault. "This is my proof of ownership. Now, a final offer." The vise clattered to the floor. Chloe's body went limp for a second, then straightened. The blackness receded slightly from her eyes, showing a sliver of terrified blue. Her own voice broke through, a desperate sobbing whisper. "Daddy, it says it will leave. It will go back to the box. But it needs a trade." Father Matheson froze. "No trades. It lies." "It wants a life for a life," Chloe continued, the entity's voice wrestling with her own. "One of you, come willingly into the dark with me. Father for daughter, mother for daughter, a fair trade. Then I go. She lives unharmed. Refuse," the eyes fixed on David,
And tonight I will use her hands to carve that tree into your wife's skin while she sleeps. You will find her in the morning, an empty canvas for my art." The offer hung in the fetid air, a poisonous temptation. David looked at Lena, saw the desperate love and horror in her eyes. He looked at his daughter, a vessel of unimaginable torment. Malakar was playing its masterstroke. It was no longer just haunting them. It was negotiating. It was offering a way out at the most horrific price imaginable. Father Matheson's voice cut through the silence, firm and resolute. "We do not bargain with parasites. We do not sacrifice the innocent to the void. Your offer is rejected." Chloe's face collapsed into a mask of utter human fury. The blackness swallowed her eyes completely. "Fool!" the voice roared, shaking the very foundations of the house. Dust rained from the ceiling. Chloe's hand flew to the crucifix at her neck. With a strength no child possessed, she gripped the silver. Smoke hissed from her palm, but she didn't let go. She pulled. The chain snapped. The crucifix clattered to the concrete floor, its glow extinguished. A wave of force erupted from Chloe, throwing David and Father Matheson back against the stairs. The single light bulb overhead exploded into fragments. In the sudden absolute darkness, they heard Chloe's body drop to the floor. And then they heard her stand up. The sound of her joints popping and cracking was like stepping on dry twigs. A low, satisfied chuckle echoed in the blackness, a sound that was now, completely, undeniably, coming from their little girl. When the emergency flashlight from David's phone flickered on, it illuminated Chloe standing by the workbench. She was smiling. It was her smile, but it was wrong, vicious, triumphant. In her hand, she held a long, sharp awl from the tool bench. She pointed the awl's tip at her own throat, pressing just enough to dimple the skin. The voice that came out was a sweet, perfect mimicry of her own, dripping with malicious glee. "Daddy, Mommy, let's play a new game. The game is called Choose. Do I carve my name on my skin, or do I go upstairs and carve it on yours?" The leash was broken. Malakar was in full, terrifying control, and it had armed its hostage.
The beam from David's phone shook, painting frantic shadows as it fixed on his daughter's face. That sweet, vicious smile, the awl's sharp point denting the soft skin of her throat. In that moment, every instinct to rush her, to plead, to scream, collided and froze in his... The beam from David's phone shook, painting frantic shadows as it fixed on his daughter's face. That sweet, vicious smile, the awl's sharp point denting the soft skin of her throat. In that moment, every instinct to rush her, to plead, to scream, collided and froze in his chest. This was the trap. Any move was the wrong move. Father Matheson was the first to break the paralyzing silence. His voice was low, a steady current beneath the roaring panic. "Malakar," he used the name like a weapon. "You have your control. You have your victory. Show us your power, not a child's parlor trick. Or are you still just a scared thing from a hole in the ground, playing with tools?" Chloe's head, Malakar's head, snapped toward the priest. The smile didn't falter, but the eyes, those bottomless black pools, narrowed. "You wish to see power, shepherd? You stand in my temple. You breathe my air." She lowered the awl from her throat. With her other hand, she gestured vaguely at the stone foundation wall behind her. A deep, grinding groan emanated from the mortar. Hairline fractures spiderwebbed across the concrete, weeping that same dark, silty water that had tainted the taps. The very house seemed to ache. "Stop," Lena whispered, the word more a breath than a sound. "You'll bring it down on top of her." "Her?" The entity chuckled, using Chloe's vocal cords to produce a sound that was utterly alien. "This body is a tool, a means to an end. If it breaks, I find another. The mother has a pleasing warmth. Perhaps I will migrate." The casual cruelty of it, the utter disregard finally shattered David's paralysis, not with rage, but with a cold, clear focus. This was not his daughter, not right now. His daughter was trapped behind those black eyes, and to save her, he had to face the thing that wore her. "What do you want?" David asked, his voice surprisingly steady. "You had a deal, a trade. You said you'd go back to the box." The black eyes glittered. "The deal was refused. The terms have changed. I do not want a trade. I want an unmaking. I want you to watch as I unmake your life, piece by piece, starting with her mind." Chloe's free hand rose and tapped her own temple. "So many bright little memories in here. Like candles, I will blow each one out. The smell of her mother's perfume, the sound of your laugh, the name of that dead dog, all gone. She will be an empty room, and I will be the only thing left inside. That is my art." It was a fate worse than death. Lena let out a choked sob. Father Matheson took a slow, deliberate step forward. "Then you leave us no choice. We will not watch. We will fight." "With what?" Malachar sneered. "Your empty words? Your impotent God? He is not here. Only I am here." "You are wrong," the priest said. He reached into his coat and withdrew not a Bible, but the small, rotten plank from the grave, the one bearing the name Malachar. He had brought it with him. "A name has power, you said so yourself, and a root cannot live when it is exposed to the light." He held the plank in one hand, and in his other he produced a small bottle of anointing oil from his pocket. He began to pour the oil onto the carved name. Malachar's confidence flickered. For the first time, a ripple of something else, anger, concern, passed over Chloe's stolen features. "You dare defile my sigil?" "I do not defile it," the priest said, his voice rising into the cadence of a prayer. "I reclaim it in the name of the light that drives out all darkness. By the power of the Holy Spirit, I bind the spirit known as Malachar. I bind it to its own name. I bind it from causing harm. I bind it from speaking lies. I bind it to the truth of its own emptiness." As he prayed, he pressed his thumb, slick with oil, directly onto the carved name. Chloe screamed. It was a raw, piercing sound of pure agony, entirely her own. She dropped the awl, which clattered on the concrete. She clutched her head, doubling over. "Make it stop! It burns in my head!" The entity was still in control. Her body didn't collapse, but it was clearly in distress. The binding prayer, focused through its true name, was like a searing brand on its consciousness. "Now, David," Father Matheson yelled, his voice strained with effort. "The box, it's the anchor, it must be destroyed." David's eyes found the carved wooden box, where it had fallen from Chloe's lap. He lunged for it. As his fingers closed around the cold, dark wood, a jolt of paralyzing despair shot up his arm. He saw flashes, Bear's trusting eyes as he vanished, Miso's lifeless body, Chloe's face losing its light day by day. It was a weapon of pure hopelessness. "David, fight it!" Lena screamed. "For Chloe!" He gritted his teeth, clinging to the image of his daughter's real smile. He stumbled to the workbench, fumbling for the heaviest tool he could find, a rusted 3-pound sledgehammer. Malachar, reeling from the binding prayer, saw his intent. With a snarl of fury, Chloe's body launched itself at him, moving with that uncanny, jerking speed. Lena didn't hesitate. She threw herself into her daughter's path, wrapping her arms around the small, charging form. They fell to the floor in a tangle. "I've got you, baby! I've got you!" Lena wept, holding on with all her strength as Chloe's body thrashed and writhed, small fists beating against her mother's back. "Hurry!" Father Matheson boomed, his plank in his hands now trembling violently as if trying to tear itself apart. David raised the sledgehammer high above his head. He brought it down with a cry that was part anguish, part fury, onto the carved box on the workbench.
The sound was not of splintering wood. It was a deep, resonant crack, like stone breaking, and a simultaneous deafening shriek that seemed to come from the walls, the floor, the air itself. The box split in two. From the broken halves, no smoke or specter emerged. Instead, a wave of invisible force knocked everyone off their feet. The single remaining flashlight spun, casting a carousel of mad shadows. In the sudden, ringing silence, Chloe went utterly limp in Lena's arms. Then she began to cough, a weak, ragged human sound. Her body shuddered. When Lena gently turned her over, her eyes were her own, blue, terrified and confused, filled with tears. The oppressive cold in the basement began to recede, like a tide going out. "Mom," she whimpered, her voice small and scratchy. "My head, it's so quiet." But Father Matheson was not celebrating. He was staring at the broken box, then at the plank in his hand. The carved name was now smoking faintly, the wood turning to ash around the letters. "It's not over," he said, his voice grave. "The anchor is broken, not dissolved. The connection is severed, but the spirit, it's not destroyed. It's been cast out, and it is furious. It is homeless now, and a homeless evil is the most dangerous kind." As if to prove his point, the house above them erupted. Doors slammed open and shut in a violent symphony. Windows rattled in their frames. The sound of breaking glass echoed from the kitchen. A final wrathful howl of wind tore through the house, and then silence. A true, deep, empty silence. The weight was gone. The cold was just the normal chill of a basement. The entity Malachar was no longer in the house. They carried Chloe upstairs. The house was a wreck, shattered picture frames, overturned furniture, every mirror cracked. But it was just a house. The malignant intelligence that had poisoned it had been expelled. In the days that followed, Chloe slept. She slept for almost 24 hours straight, and when she woke, she was frail, emotionally raw, but she was her. The shadows under her eyes slowly faded. She could look at her camera without flinching. She didn't remember the specifics of her possession, only a long, terrifying nightmare of being trapped in a dark, cold place with an angry voice. But the victory was fragile. Father Matheson was clear. It is out there. It attached itself to a place, then to a person. It will seek a new anchor, a new vessel. It knows this family now. It will hold a grudge. You must be vigilant. Faith is not a one-time shield. It is a daily armor. He blessed the house again thoroughly and gave Chloe a new crucifix, this one a simple, lightweight wood. A reminder, not a leash, he told her, a symbol of the light you carry inside, which is stronger than any darkness. Weeks turned into a tense month. Then, on a cool, clear evening, David took the ashes of the broken box and the disintegrated plank and buried them in a hole far out in the woods. He filled it in, said a prayer of his own, and marked the spot with a simple, smooth stone. When he returned home, sweaty and dirty, he found Chloe in the backyard. She wasn't hiding. She was kneeling in the grass, her back to him. As he approached, he saw she was looking at a small, fragile shoot of green poking through the soil. A wildflower,